Hi, my name is Shannon O'Halloran.
I'm Zach Hawkins.
And our project is on media effects. So we obviously have some PowerPoint we will attach to this, but since we can't show a PowerPoint and record at the same time, we have our basics written up here for you. So media effects is a theory that relates how stories published in the media influences or amplifies current trends. A big example of a media effect would be War of the Worlds. In 1938, Orson Welles read a story from the book War of the Worlds on CBS radio network, and some of the people that were listening, about a million, I think they think, were actually concerned that the world was under alien attack, and there were actually people who committed suicide to avoid this, and so that's a big effect from media. We have the limited effects perspective, which some of the theories are like the two-step theory, attitudes change theory, and reinforcement theory are the ones that I'll be going over. So limited effects theories, though, in general, are media's influence and how it's limited by people's individual differences, social categories, and personal relationships. The two-step theory is based upon opinion leaders who initially consume the media, then interpret it and pass it on to their followers. So they're big media influencers, and they limit the behavior of the media effects. Then you have the attitude change theories, which have the dissonance theory, the selective attention, selective retention, and selective perception. So the dissonance theory is when a person is confronted with a new conflicting information, people experience a mental discomfort. So the selective retention is people remember messages that are consistent with their attitudes and beliefs. Selective attention is when people only pay attention to messages that are consistent with their pre-existing attitudes and beliefs. So similar to like a political article, you'd only read something that, if you're Democratic, you typically stay with the Democratic articles. And then you have selective perception, which is where you only interpret messages in a manner that is consistent with your attitudes and beliefs as well. And then the last one that I go over is the reinforcement theory, which is just Clapper's idea, and the theory that if media has influence at all, it's done through reinforcement.
Alright, I'm going to continue on with the limited effects perspective. The first part is uses and gratifications approach. It turned focus to explain how media influence is limited. Media doesn't do things to people, the idea of what people do things with the media, meaning like the media, if somebody on TV is killing somebody, it's not forcing somebody who's watching it to go and kill somebody, but people interpret that information how they want to. The next part is media influence is limited to what people allow it to be. The next part of this is agenda setting. Agenda setting argues that media doesn't tell us what you think, but they do tell us what you think about. Like in political debates or political, like presidential election years, think of like the differences between how CNN and Fox News would portray a candidate. They kind of try and sway you in one direction over the other. Moving on to the dependency theory, it's comprised of several parts. The first part is that media influence resides in a larger social system, and media's role in that system, and audiences' relationships to the media. The second part is the dependence on media and its content. It's the key variable in understanding when and why messages alter audiences' beliefs, feelings, and so on. The third part is we have become more increasingly dependent on media, especially in social media and reading like news stories online as to waiting for like your 6 o'clock newscast because it's more convenient. This dependency is related to two things. The first thing is its importance of specific info delivery functions, and the second thing is the degree of change and conflict in present society. The last part of my little section here is the social cognitive theory. It is the idea that people don't learn new behaviors by trying them and succeeding or failing, but they are dependent on replication of the actions of others.
So now we have the cultural theories. And cultural theories are the idea that meaning and effects are negotiated by the media and audience as they interact with the culture. So you have the critical cultural theory, which is when media operates primarily to justify and support the status quo at all expenses of ordinary people. So sticking with what they know kind of thing. You have the Frankfurt School, which is a media theory that's centered in neo-Marxism, and it values serious art, and its viewing is a consumption as a mean to elevate people towards a better life. This is like where the critical cultural perspective kind of came from, and it's based off of two scholars who were at the Frankfurt School, and it kind of has led to like the typical media flair, popular music, radio, and movie comedies. You have the British cultural theory, which is a theory that is leading to domination over cultural and its influence on founded cultures. So this theory came about after World War II because there was class tension and the wealthy had so much more power over people. So this theory sort of came about, and now it's the place where you kind of like think of for like feminist research and pop culture in Europe and the U.S.
All right, moving along to the news production research. It's got four major parts, but what news production research is, it's the study of how economic and other influences on the way the news is produced distort and bias news coverage towards those in power. The first part of this is personalized news, which is news that focuses around one person or a particular family. It's very interesting news, but reduces importance on social and political problems. The next part is dramatized news. It usually has a hero and a villain with some kind of conflict and leading to some kind of showdown towards the end of it. And the third type is fragmented news. It's brief, capsuled stories because of time constraints on TV or radio and the cost of doing this kind of thing. And finally, the last one is normalized news, which is reporting on a natural or human-made disaster to seek out and report opinions of and the perspectives of the authorities. So say like a tornado comes through and destroys a town, you see a lot of news media come in and interview like the fire chief, the police chief, or one of the main EMTs in the town to find out injuries, damage reports, and then they'll go and like interview citizens of that town to get their perspective on what they saw.
So we have the meme making perspective, which has like three separate areas, I guess. So you have the symbolic interaction, product positioning, and social construction of reality. Symbolic interaction is the idea that giving meaning to a symbol, and then these symbols control people's behavior. So like the symbol of a swastika could really make people feel uncomfortable because it's linked to the genocide. And then you have product positioning, which is practice in advertising of assigning meaning to a product based on who buys it instead of the product itself. So like makeup is advertised based on women, not just on the product. So since it's not like a gender neutral kind of thing, really it's focused more towards pleasing a woman and stuff. And then you have the social construction of reality, which is like theory for explaining how cultures construct and maintain their realities using signs and symbols, and how like people learn to behave in their social world through interaction with it. So an example of that would be like signs when you're driving. So you have your stop signs, you stop. You have your yield signs, you yield, and stuff like that.
Okay, I'm going to talk to you about the cultivation analysis now. It's got 5 separate parts. The first part is TV versus other media sources. TV really requires little to no intelligence to figure out. It doesn't require you to know how to read. It basically just needs you to know words, sit down and listen to it while an image is being portrayed across the screen to you. The second part is TV is a central cultural arm. meaning two scholars said that TV is a chief creator of synthetic culture patterns, both environment and information, for most heterogeneous publics in history. Um, and they also went on by saying that, sorry, next part. Realities are cultivated by TV basic assumptions on facts of life. It doesn't teach facts and figures, but builds general frames of reference. The fourth part to this is the major function of TV to stabilize social patterns. Basically, that one's really self-explanatory. You see people hanging around in a coffee house like Friends, like the show Friends. People are going to want to go hang out with their friends and casually do that kind of thing. Or you see a big party scene in a TV show, people are going to be like, oh, that's cool to do that. Let's go do that. And the last part is observable, measurable, and independent contributions. Even though we don't always see media effects on ourselves and others, they do happen, and the culture will change eventually because of it.
So now we have 4 questions that are about effects. So the first one is, does media violence lead to aggression? This is the most debated of the 4 we'll go over, and studies show that there was an increase in violence from the 60s when TV started becoming rooted in the USA homes. And really the argument can go both ways. Yes, it does lead to aggression, no it doesn't, and it's really under certain circumstances. Those circumstances are like stimulation model, aggressive cues model, vicarious reinforcement, environmental incentives, and desensitization. So the stimulation model is the direct causal relationship between violent content and aggressive behavior. They really stress that it's a causal relationship here. And which leads to the aggressive cues model, which is the idea that media portrayals can suggest that certain classes of people, like women and foreigners, are more susceptible kind of thing, like a class of people are. And this is also based on the social cognitive theory, but these ideas were kind of deflated in the idea of Parthenosis, which is the idea that watching violence reduces a person's aggressive drive, but scientists are skeptical of it because if you think of it, like watching someone eat doesn't discourage your want to eat or your hunger. Vicarious reinforcement is the idea that observed reinforcement operates the same way as actual reinforcement. So like seeing a bad guy get punished is a form of vicarious reinforcement, but they're also punished by aggression, which is mainly like they're out-aggressing. The good guy is out-aggressing the bad guy. So now the aggression is still being reinforced even though the bad guy is still being punished. You have environmental incentives, so the notion that the real world incentives can lead observers to ignore the negative vicarious reinforcement, and that they have learned to associate it with a given behavior. And they say, in our book it even says like, it's clear that most people who watch aggressive videos and stuff don't actually exhibit aggression after. And this could be kind of due to a desensitization where we're becoming more accepting of the real world violence because it's constant present in television. So when we think about somebody getting in a fist fight, we don't think of it as a big deal really because we see it all the time. So now we go on to do portrayals of drugs and alcohol and increased consumption. Very similar to the violence debate, there are studies that advertisements can stimulate a higher consumption of alcohol and tobacco use. And the Center of Alcohol Marketing and Youth reported that more youth drink rather than smoke tobacco. The average person ages 12 to 17 begin drinking at age 13. Drinking before the age of 15 will make you 5 times more likely to develop alcohol dependency. And there are more youth, the more that the youth read alcohol advertisements or see alcohol advertisements, the more they are likely to drink and drink heavily. So yes, there is a casual link between the portrayal of drugs and alcohol and the increased consumption, but it's so commonly used in get-togethers and celebrations that we don't really look at it as a negative thing when we see people using alcohol and drugs. It's unless it's like actually illegal drugs. I'm talking more like prescriptions, I suppose, or if they're abusing it. And I mean, most of the time when you see an alcohol ad or a cigarette ad, it's most of the time it's not portraying for use of them. It's they are showing fun times and they are attractive people. They even put on each one of the things that there is the Surgeon General's warning about both of them and that you should drink responsibly and stuff. So it's as much as it can increase consumption, it also warns you about the consumption of their products. And then the next question is, what is media's contribution to gender and racial ethnic stereotyping? It creates a standardized image or concept to members of certain groups, usually based on limited information. So it demonstrates like an underrepresentation in media, which like you have your gays and lesbians, your women and people of color, older people even, where we portray them as a certain way to kind of, because that's the stereotype we want them to follow or to lead. And we willingly throughout our lives are, without a thought, stereotyping these kind of things that we see in media. And this is just because of what we learned through media. So like we have the dumb jock, the dumb blonde, the nerd who wears glasses and is socially inept, and stuff like that. And does media have pro-social effects is our last question. For effects, and yes, it can demonstrate that people, especially children, can and will model the good or pro-social behaviors they see in media, and it's often to a greater extent than they will with the negative behaviors. So we have our 5 discussion questions, and obviously since we're videotaping it, we are going to just discuss the questions between Zach and I. And so our first question is, Zach, do you think that violence in movies, TV, video games, anything like that can make a person more violent?
I don't think so. Let me put it into a personal perspective. When I was growing up in the 90s, my dad and I, every Monday night, as soon as 7 o'clock hit, we'd turn it on USA and watch WWF Raw is War, pro wrestling. Every Monday you saw somebody getting hit in the head with a chair, or getting busted open, or telling someone to go screw themselves kind of thing, to put it in lighter terms from what they actually said. But I believe it's really how your parents teach you that that's not okay. It's really like how you're brought up in your home environment to teach you that, yes, they're doing these things on TV, but it's solely for the entertainment for you. It doesn't mean that it's right for you to do this kind of stuff.
I would agree. I think that it doesn't exactly make a violent person. I mean, there are definitely people who will maybe play Grand Theft Auto and think that since they played Grand Theft Auto, that it would be a good idea that they know how to steal a car or something, I guess. But, I mean, at the same time, like, I would say that me and my brothers, we definitely watched pro wrestling also. But after we watched pro wrestling, we would also try and imitate what they were doing. So it did lead to some violence, I guess. I mean, but I don't know if it was really, I don't know if it really influences people so terribly that they would be extremely aggressive, I suppose. Anything else you want to say on that? Okay. Next question is, do you think alcohol and drugs in video games, TV, and movies will influence viewers to use the drugs?
Alcohol for sure. You look at movies like The Hangover or Project X, and they're just a bunch of people getting completely bombed out of their mind, having a great time, and pretty much showing that if you get drunk out of your mind, like blackout stupid drunk, that you will have a great time, and this is the only way to really have a great time when consuming alcohol. The same thing can be said about marijuana in a movie like Pineapple Express. The two main characters, played by James Franco and Seth Rogen, both are really heavy pot smokers in the movie. And yes, they do get into buying, but they always go back to smoking a joint or something to relax them, which is showing the public that do this, it's okay, it will relax you, it will calm you down, which are some of the side effects, but since it's illegal, doesn't put out a good image for the
illegal
youth.
use.
Exactly.
I would say like a big influence on that. I would say that I would see people getting excited about is 21 Jump Street has, if you've ever seen it, they have a really funny party scene, and it's, you know, these guys are supposed to be cops and they're supplying alcohol and marijuana to a party of a bunch of high schoolers. Even when they're getting the marijuana, because they're stealing it from the evidence booth, one of them is like, hey, I got a pound of cocaine. He's like, we're trying to show them that it's a good time, not kill their lives. And then they instead grab marijuana. And so it's kind of like, well, you know, maybe people who haven't or aren't used to that kind of stuff, they think, oh, so marijuana is okay to smoke because cop picks that over cocaine, which, I mean, like there are studies that say that it is obviously better for you, but you shouldn't do it to drug either way. And so I think that it definitely can influence a person to want to use drugs or to drink when they want to and stuff. Our third question is, how about advertisements for alcohol, cigarettes, and guns?
For me, I don't really see too many cigarette ads since they're only allowed in like magazines and they're really not put in there that often. And I really don't read that many magazines, so they really don't influence me, but I'm sure they do influence some people in society. As for the alcohol, yeah, whenever I see an ad for a beer during a sports event or anything on TV or something like that, it just makes me want to go out and grab an ice cold beer and drink one. It definitely has an effect on me for sure, and I'm sure it does a lot of other people. As for guns, you really don't typically see many advertisements for guns, unless it's like linked to hunting season, especially up here. It might be a little different, like in Texas, where they are really strong on the right to bear arms down there, so you might see different advertisements for gun usage and stuff like that, but obviously in a safe manner, but no, the only one that would really influence myself in all of those would probably be the alcohol one, just because when I see that ice cold beer on TV, it just makes me want to go and have one.
I would agree with the alcohol thing. It's kind of like, I personally am influenced by food ads. I'm a big food eater, I love food. And so it's like, if I see a Wendy's burger, like, I'm like, wow, I really should go get a Wendy's burger or something. And I mean, I can definitely see people doing the same thing for alcohol. They see like a Spectre commercial, they're like, wow, you know, maybe I should drink vodka this weekend. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea, I'll go pick up a bottle or something, you know. And with cigarette ads, I do read magazines, I do see cigarette ads a lot. I'm more seeing electronic cigarette ads, which I have one of my own, unfortunately. I don't smoke it too often, but I do, and I think that it definitely does influence me a little bit. Like, when I see it, I'm like, oh, I should go get a different flavor soon, because I'm running out of this one or something. And with guns, my family's not a gun user, we don't really pay attention to guns. First time I shot, I was 19 years old. So, I mean, I'm not personally interested in them, but, I mean, I do only see advertisements when I'm like in the store that actually sells guns, I guess, like the Shield or something. Other than that, I don't really see advertisements so much for it, but I can see that it could influence someone to buy one if they see an advertisement for it, especially like hunters and stuff. Fourth question. Wait, did you have anything else?
No.
Okay, so our fourth question is, does media have an effect on racial, ethnic, and gender stereotypes? My personal belief is yes, right off the bat. I have no question about it. I think that we do have effects on. I think it does make an effect on our stereotypes of our races and of our ethnic groups and of genders. I mean, there's the race stereotype that when you go to a movie theater, there is an African American person in there, that they are going to talk back to the movie, kind of thing, especially at the scary movie or whatever, that they will talk back to the characters, and with ethnic groups, maybe like Mexicans jump the border kind of stuff, like their stereotypes and all that, and then with genders, that men are the breadwinners, women are the stay-at-home mothers, and it's kind of like the 1950s like nuclear family kind of stereotype that still sticks today.
For me, it's pretty much the same thing. Like, you see all these different stereotypes around the United States just because we are such a diverse country. There was one ad I was actually shown in one of my German culture classes last semester, portraying different countries advertising something. I don't remember what they were advertising, but they had like a French person with a baguette and a glass of wine. They had an Italian eating spaghetti. But the one that stuck out to me the most was the German guy. They had him dressed in lederhosen, with a mug of beer in hand, and everything he said sounded really, really angry, which I think a lot of people around the world think that's all Germans do. But really, they are not, obviously not that all the time, or ever. But yeah, that was basically, for me, you covered all of the good points on that.
Okay. The last question is, do you think something like the War of the Worlds situation can happen again?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff it gets blown up on social media, and a lot of people don't read between the lines on stuff that's like posted on Facebook and Twitter. Like, I remember a couple of years ago, or it could have been last year, I don't remember, it was within the last couple of years, the whole thing about somebody started a rumor that Morgan Freeman died, and it went across millions and millions of people on social media, and it just got to the point where a lot of people actually thought the man was dead, but clearly he's not.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think it could happen. I don't think to the extent of, hopefully not to the extent where people panic and kill themselves, but I think that social media really can make something like this happen again. I mean, I know that on Twitter every year, basically, there is this giant snake that has eaten something, and people start a rumor that it was a human, and that the snake needs to be put down or whatever they do with snakes, I guess. And it's like, people really freak out about it, or stuff that like trends that's negative, like the cut for Bieber thing was huge. That was something where, because he was caught smoking marijuana, kids started cutting themselves in order to get him to stop. So, I mean, I think that it can definitely lead to something. Media can do something like that to a very large group of people very quickly, and it's terrifying how much effect that media can really have over people to the extent of one of the world's.
I would say especially to the age group of like 16 to 23.
I would say 14.
14 even?
I'd go younger.
Younger?
Because a lot of kids, like in middle school, use Twitter and Facebook. So,
True.
I mean, once they start using that stuff, I think that's when they really start getting influenced. Anything else?
Nope.
We do have a video that we are going to attach with it that we would show, that we would have shown in class. And so we'll attach that as well. And thank you for letting us do this now. We hope you have a good summer break, I suppose. Hopefully we'll see you in another class.